Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to see two awards today. Awards at ASLO have different flavors and different intentions, and today's are an interesting contrast. The latter award is going to be for a paper that has been transformative in our discipline, whose influence has been felt over decades, and the former is for an individual whose research has been felt in a context over decades. And in particular, the opening award, the Ruth Patrick Award, it is one for the honoring the use of science to the public benefit. I think a lot of us are at universities, and we have maybe a tendency to think that the transformative science that's going to improve the world, that's going to save the world, that's going to make lives better for people, derives from that sort of academic environment. I think today's awardee shows a different example of a situation in which the transformation comes from a different type of setting. Today's awardee, Jim Cloern, is a spectacular example of how our bias is inappropriate. And he's got the standard training. His bachelor's and master's were from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and he followed that up with a Washington State PhD. But since the mid-1970s, Jim's been a research scientist at the United States Geological Survey. And in particular, he's developed really one of the world's best understood, he's developed a research program that's allowed us to understand estuaries better than almost anywhere else in the world. In particular, his contributions to the discipline have been profound and important and numerous. He's developed a 40-year-long database, a research database for the San Francisco Bay system, which has allowed us to use it both to understand that individual system and the tension between societal development and ecosystem process and environmental protection, but also to generalize beyond that individual system to broader understanding of oceanic systems, and particularly at the boundary of continents and oceans. His research is profound, it's innovative, and it's derived from a government position which you might not necessarily think is the ideal career scenario for young scientists to consider. I think, like Ruth Patrick, one of the things that's really interesting about Jim is he's a master of phytoplankton ecology and how he uses this to understand ecosystem processes is maybe at the fundament of his advances. So today's award is for the Ruth Patrick Award for Applied Science, and our honoree this year for 2015 is Jim Cloern of the United States Geological Survey.
Well, I'm really excited to receive this award, and I want to tell you why. I'm excited for two reasons. I'm excited because of the organization that this stems from, and I'm excited because of the career that it honors through the naming of this award for the accomplishments of Ruth Patrick. ASLO has been a part of my life for over 4 decades. I first joined ASLO when I was a student taking limnology at the University of Wisconsin. And I think Limnology and Oceanography was the first journal that I opened and read regularly. The first talk that I gave was at an ASLO meeting in Victoria in British Columbia. And like many of you, early in my career, I wanted to be a contributing and publishing member of the ASLO community. But I got off to a rough start. The first manuscript that I submitted to ASLO was rejected. It was rejected profoundly, and I saved the rejection letter. Sometime after that, I submitted a second paper. It was rejected. I did not save that decision letter. And the third manuscript that I submitted to ASLO was also rejected. So early in my career, I learned 2 important lessons. The first lesson is that the bar that ASLO and its journals sets is very high, and that if I was going to reach that bar, I needed to up my game. And the second is that rejection is part of the career that we've chosen. Rejection is part of being a research scientist. And I'm not sure that we talk enough about rejection to students. It's an important part of being a research scientist, and we need to talk about rejection. We've all experienced it. Well, maybe Carlos Duarte hasn't experienced it. Maybe Steve Carpenter hasn't experienced it, but the rest of us have. So I'd like to tell you a story about a postdoc who worked for me in 1999 and 2000. His name is Bill Sobczak. Bill is now a professor of biology at the College of Holy Cross in the US. Bill came to us to work on a really tough problem, and the problem was to identify the sources of organic matter that fuel ecosystem metabolism and production in food webs supporting production of fish in estuaries. And Bill did a great job of designing this study, of collecting and analyzing the samples, and writing a manuscript that he submitted for publication to one of the leading ecology journals. And I remember the look on Bill's face when he opened up his rejection letter, and he went through the swing of emotions that we commonly go through when that happens. And the first is, we're shocked. We're shocked by this decision. How could they reject this paper? I worked so hard on this. This was a really good paper. And then we start reading in great detail individual phrases of reviewer comments, and the blood starts boiling. And eventually we get to the point where we have to enter the rational phase and make a decision. What do we do next? And Bill did a great job of taking the reviewer comments and rebuilding his manuscript, addressing the weaknesses that were identified in the review process. And he submitted it to a second journal. He submitted it to the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the US. The paper was actually handled by Steve Carpenter. I don't know if you remember handling this paper, Steve. And I thought once the paper was published, I thought that it was an important enough paper that that I should nominate Bill for an award, and so I did. So in the summer of 2004, Bill Sobczak stood on a stage like this at an ASLO meeting in Savannah, Georgia, where he was presented ASLO's Raymond Lindemann Award. So in a period of a couple of years, Bill came full circle from the disillusionment of having a paper rejected to standing on a stage and receiving ASLO's Lindemann Award. And when I look back on my career, I guess, in a sense, I've come full circle as well, especially when I look at the early part of my career when I was wondering, do I have what it takes to publish a paper in L&O, to now standing on this stage and receiving the Ruth Patrick Award. It's kind of mysterious to me how this happens, but of course I'm obviously thrilled. So a couple of key messages here for students and postdocs. These are messages that I try to give to students and postdocs that I work with. The first is that this can be a humbling profession, and the second is that success in this profession requires that we acknowledge that rejection can happen, be prepared for it, and know how to deal with it. The second reason why I'm excited to receive this award is the name that it honors. Ruth Patrick was an inspiration both as a research scientist and an environmental activist. The New York Times published an obituary of Ruth Patrick after her death at the age of 105. And that obituary tells us that she received her PhD in botany in 1934. She took a position with the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia in the United States, where she worked during her career. She had a remarkable career of scientific accomplishment. She published over 200 scientific articles. Her expertise was the ecology of freshwater algae and the ecology of rivers. She became interested in the problem of water pollution, which was an emerging global problem in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. She's recognized as a pioneer in the use of organisms as indicators of pollution effects, and in her case, diatoms, developed a system of using diatoms as biological indicators of pollution effects. And she was a pioneer in developing the concept and the recognition that one of the outcomes of environmental stressors is reduction of biological diversity. And in fact, this has been called the Patrick Principle. So she was an inspiration for her scientific accomplishment. And she was also an inspiration for her passion about and commitment to broad communication. It's clear from her career that she wanted her science and our science to make a difference. And she was engaged at levels that I think were unusual at the time. She reached, as a scientific advisor, the highest level that you can achieve in our country. She was an advisor to 2 presidents. She advised President Lyndon Johnson on the problem of water pollution, and later she advised President Ronald Reagan on the problem of acid rain. And she played a prominent role in writing the landmark legislation in our country to protect water quality from effects of pollution. This is the 1972 Federal Clean Water Act. So to me, I think the spirit of the Ruth Patrick Award stems from her commitment to excellence, both in scientific research and in broad communication and engagement with the public, with the press, and with the people who are in such difficult positions to establish policy and make decisions to conserve our resources and manage our ecosystems and the services that they provide. I think that I have a sense that Ruth Patrick understood herself that we as research scientists have a commitment and obligation to communicate outside the world of science. And our scientific societies are now recognizing this. She recognized something early that we now are beginning to recognize. And this is reflected in the program of this meeting. If you look at the program of this meeting, the Ruth Patrick spirit is infused throughout it. On Sunday, we began with a series of workshops to improve our communication skills. Just after this plenary is a session giving us guidance about how to talk to the press, about environmental issues. And this theme is incorporated into the program. There are sessions on policy implications of aquatic research. So I think that all of this comes from the spirit of Ruth Patrick, and it's an honor for me to receive this award in her name from ASLO. I want to thank my dear friends Lisa Lucas and Tara Schraga for the nomination. I've received support from my buddies Hans Perl and Tim Hollabaugh and Jacob Karstensen and Carlos Duarte. I hope to see them in the streets of Granada tonight where we can share a bottle of cava together. Thank you very much.